Hello everyone and welcome back. Well, let's start off a brand new series and this time let's feature the Unimog S404. This is a recent release from AK, and as you can tell from the side of the box here, there's all sorts of different options available here, and we'll take a look at those a little bit more closely, and of course we'll start putting together our own kit here very shortly. However, before we start putting glue to plastic, let's take a quick look at the contents of the box. First thing we notice is our familiar gray plastic, nicely done as well. We have our instruction booklet with the cover artwork also included. And this instruction booklet will look very familiar, especially if you have worked with the FJ series Toyotas from AK as well. And then our decal sheet, our markings, and these will represent the options as shown on the side of the box and also in the instruction booklet. More about the markings and this paint scheme that we'll be using here in just a few minutes. Well, putting our fingers on the plastic, we can see exactly what we have here, and, well, this looks really nice. The detailing on these parts is really nice and crisp. Good detail there. I don't see seam lines or knockout and pin marks, anything like that. It should be pretty straightforward, especially on cleanup. That will be nice. A small limited sprue of clear plastic for the windscreen and headlights, and then also included rubber tires. These are soft rubber tires. And then finally, we have this mystery box. So let's see what we have in here. So we'll open up the box. Well, we have some packing foam. Actually, this will come in handy because we could use the foam for making chipping later on, perhaps. And we have a printed part here. So what do we have? We have the gun stand and the gun. So that's a 3D printed part here. That's a nice detail. That should come in very handy, of course, for one of these options or many of these options. And then what else is in the box? Well, we have a set of resin tires. A nice replacement for those soft rubber tires. Probably no choice here in my mind which ones I'll be using. And so let's take a quick look through the instruction booklet and see what we have coming up. Well, as I mentioned earlier, if you have any experience with the earlier released FJ series of Toyotas, this instruction booklet will look incredibly familiar. It's the exact same layout, same colors, very clearly marked, easy follow diagrams. Throughout, there's options available for the different types of Unimogs portrayed, so depending on the scheme that you choose, there are some different options here and there. Those are clearly marked out. There's also these question marks from time to time, and in this case, this happens to do with the tires. So this shows the exact moment when we could choose to use either the resin tires or the kit rubber tires, so that's nice. Just look for those little question marks. And the little numerals A through H, which signify different variants that this kit can be built up into. As we move to the rear part of the booklet, well, now we start having our color options, the color plates here, and these are all nicely laid out. These are the same options as shown on the side of the packaging itself, the side of the box art. And yes, there's some fantastic options here, very, very tempting. And of course, these are all represented on the decal sheet as well. I'm very tempted to do one of these, but I think I might stray off the path just a little bit and find my own options. One of the aspects about scale modeling, especially historical subjects, is that we can present ourselves into any era, any time frame. And in this case, we're going to travel back in time a bit to Rhodesia, Africa, the current country of Zimbabwe. But back in the 1960s, all the way through, say, 1980, there was quite a bit of turmoil in this part of the world. In 1960, UK Prime Minister Harold Macmillan, he gave a Winds of Change speech, basically signaling that Britain was going to decolonize Africa and supported majority rule, would transform what was apartheid-type governments into black majority rule. Of course, the ideal is great, but you can imagine that there was conflict and power struggles that resulted because of that. The Belgian Congo was the first to do this, and they erupted in civil war. Rhodesia took a look at that and says, you know what, we're not going to exactly follow that path. We're not going to open up exactly quite as quickly. So they held open elections, but there were some stipulations which prevented a large majority of the black population to the open voting. So of course, this turmoil led to various factions pulling apart. And so we had on one side the Rhodesian government forces that was trying to more or less maintain law and order, the status quo. Then we had the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army. These people were looking for black majority rule. And then on the side of them, the Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army. And they were basically a communist, socialist type government army. And as you can imagine, at the height of the Cold War, this turns into a proxy war where we have Soviet influence on one side, US influence on the another side, trade embargoes, all sorts of different maneuvering behind the scenes. So it was quite, like I said before, quite the mess. And oh boy, that's been a long-winded way to set the scene here. And in behind here, of course, there's been photographs of just some of the initial construction of this Unimog vehicle here. As you can tell, it's been going together very, very quickly here. Easy parts. Starts with the chassis. Everything fits together very nicely. Majority of the work is on the chassis. That's where all the small parts are, and quite a bit of detailing. As we move upwards here to the crew cab and the rear cargo bed, large pieces go together very, very quickly and really in no time at all. This is truly could be a weekend project, even a day project if you really settled down and got to work. And there we are. We have our Unimog all kind of stitched together there. A lot of this is just held in place very temporarily until we get to painting. And then of course we have our resin tires. Yep, that was my choice. We're going to replace our resin wheels and tires. And then finally we have our final piece here. Now, what a fantastic looking model, and as I've mentioned before, so many options. Not only the 8 options on the box art, of course I found these Rhodesian options. There are so many civilian variants of this vehicle that are out there. Basically anytime, any place, any color scheme you want, there's probably a reference for it. So a very welcome addition to the modeling community for sure. Oh, so many options. But of course, I decided we're going to go ahead and do this Rhodesian camouflage from the Rhodesian National Army. So let's take a look at what we have coming up ahead of us. Being a former British colony, you can imagine that the equipment was all British provided and camouflaged in the single tone, basically bronze green color. That's great for the parade ground, but once the conflict started and they got out in the bush, they realized that that color just, as I said, stuck out like a sore thumb. Vehicles were repainted in a more blue-green color with wide bands of disruptive camouflage in an ochre color or what was termed baby diaper yellow. And now comes the fun part where we get to try to mix up some colors here to simulate the same colors and camouflage patterns as seen on these Rhodesian vehicles. A quick time out for me to say thank you to my Patreon. These are the people who make this channel happen through their support. If you enjoy this channel and would like to help support it, I do have a Patreon page. The link for that is in the description below. In return, early viewing of these videos, special Patreon-only videos, work-in-progress photographs. I would appreciate your support. I'd love to see you over there. Thank you very much. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to guess that when the Rhodesians repainted their vehicles, they had stocks of bronze green color sitting around. So I'm guessing that's probably what their base color started at. And then they started adding other elements to it in order to get to the more blue tone. So that's what I decided to do here. So I've got bronze green color. That's kind of my base color. I've added some deck tan to lighten it. And then I'm using light blue to give it a more bluish hue to it. Pretty close on these opening stages here. We'll tweak it about a little bit, trying to get these colors nailed down as we kind of work through the process here. But I think it's a good first step. Adding just a few more drops of deck tan, just a light overspray to fade out the color a bit. And that's one thing that came through a lot of the reports is how faded the paint schemes became over time in the hot African sun. And with that, I think we've got our base coat down. I think it looks suitably bluish green. Like I said, maybe a little on the blue side, but we can play with that a little bit later. So now let's get on to the camouflage pattern. And now for a suitable baby diaper yellow color, I choose light stone, and I do thin this out a little bit with a deck tan just to give a little bit more of a faded effect. And then with references off to the side of the screen here, I'm just kind of following what I see in the photographs, and we'll start adding the camouflage. And so we start to conclude our session with the camouflage pattern here. That was actually quite enjoyable. It's a nice, easy scheme to accomplish here. Came back and forth a little bit, tightened up some of those edges, added just a touch more green in some of those spaces in between just to green up the camouflage, the base color, just slightly. And I think it's all working well now. It still has a blue-green tint to it, maybe a little too green now. Again, we can adjust it later on. But I think it's a very attractive camouflage scheme, and I think I'm going to enjoy weathering this out quite a bit. I'm going to set the model aside for just a little while, allow that paint to dry up a bit. And so in the meantime, let's work on a few details. I have the cab seats, the driver and passenger seat. We'll paint those up, just leaving them on the sprue. Don't get my fingers all messy this time. I'm learning here. And then for the headlights, the lens part, the reflective part on the interior, I'm using these metallic pins. I've just recently come across these, and boy, there's a lot of different uses for these, not just making metallic chrome bumpers, but in this case, like I said, the metallic reflective part inside the headlight lamp, just draw it in there, no paintbrushes to clean up, and the chrome or the reflective nature is ideal. I'm really enjoying these a lot. Returning back to the model now, I'm going to go ahead and show just a little bit of extra hardware, some scratches and such on the bumper itself. I generally don't add a lot of scratching or chipping details manually in this manner, but on the bumper, I want that to be a little bit more worn. So just using acrylic paints, just adding some chips and scratches here and there. Unfortunately, that's going to start bringing us to the conclusion of this episode. This is about as far as I have built at the moment, so this is as much as I can show you. But we did get a lot done. Of course, we opened up the box. We did our construction. Of course, I talked over the top of the construction, but it's a great kit to put together. I would highly recommend it. And then we got into a little bit of the history, and of course, we've painted out our Unimog in the Rhodesian National Army colors here. So next steps, of course, we're going to do quite a bit of weathering on this, make this look sufficiently beat up and dusty in the Bush Wars. I do have some figures that are on the way, so we'll be painting some figures. We'll place this into a small scene or vignette. So that's all something to look forward to. As a reminder, if you've enjoyed this episode, please hit that like and subscribe. If you'd like to support this channel even further, I do have that Patreon page, and the link is in the description below. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Until the next one, guys, take care, and of course, happy modeling.